Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I will call the November 15th Select Board meeting to order at 5:30. In terms of changes to the agenda, I think we just have a couple of additional announcements that we'll get to in a minute. And otherwise, we will accept the agenda. And for announcements, the town manager is online tonight, so I'll just go ahead and read these. The select board meeting is being audio and video recorded. We have no meeting next week, Wednesday, November 22nd, and town offices will be closed on Thursday, November 23rd in observation of the Thanksgiving holiday. The 44th annual Babe Patterson Thanksgiving dinner is being served at the American Legion Hall on Thanksgiving Day. This is open to any and all who wish to come. It is it's free to the public, and it is from noon until 4. That's at 21 Washington Street. And we have our outgoing police chief here to introduce our incoming police chief.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Yes, today, Jody Casper, the current police chief in Northampton, Massachusetts, who will soon be first of the year, the police chief here in Nantucket, has come to the island to meet the staff and talk with us about the challenges our department faces. And I'd like to introduce her, Jody Casper from Northampton, Mass.
Good evening. It's good to be with you all. This was impromptu, so I have nothing too exciting to say to the group, but it's really been a pleasure to get to know everyone so far. It's been a long process moving through it, and through that time, I've had the opportunity to meet some of you, meet many people on the island, and I'm really excited to meet members of the police department as well. So it's been fantastic. I'm looking forward to coming out in mid-December and then permanently taking over in January. So thank you so much for the position, for the invite out, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
Yes, welcome. Thank you. Okay, are there any opening select board reports or comments?
Done.
Brooke?
Yeah. I wanted to announce that the Solid Waste Planning Group has set a date for a comprehensive workshop on the landfill solid waste management planning moving forward, the decisions that will be in front of town meeting around those issues. And that is going to be scheduled on January 11th at 6 p.m. It will be in hybrid format and more information to come, but I wanted to give the community a heads up to get it on your calendars. And the idea here is to bring all the pieces of the puzzle of what goes on at the landfill, what we need for the future, into one presentation, because it often comes in bits and pieces. And so we really want to do a comprehensive review with the community and have opportunity for question and answer in the moment. So thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, I don't believe that there is any follow-up from prior public comments. And so we'll move to the public comment portion of our agenda. This is for anything that's not otherwise on our agenda for discussion. Topics will be limited to 3 minutes. I don't have anyone in the room, it seems. Campbell Sutton online.
Good evening, everyone. I assume you can hear me?
Yes, good evening, Campbell. Go ahead.
Super. Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for their time and efforts on for the special town meeting. And I wanted to thank the short-term rental work group for their efforts. As you know, I was disappointed that didn't go through, but hopefully better minds will prevail or something, and we'll have something else to look at. I also wanted to thank Brooke for her and the town for the presentational pieces that they offered prior to town meeting. I thought that was very helpful for those of us who attended. I had a couple of thoughts about the presentation of that short-term rental piece, obviously hindsight 2020. But I think we got stuck on one thing, one area, and it made me wonder if it might be helpful in the future, since we're just amending an existing chapter, if we, had a vote on the definition section, because I think that would have been very important to pass. And I don't think there was anyone really with an issue on it. And I also felt that one of the things that seemed to be missing in the presentation was, I believe it was section O that covered waivers and the application. So two things, I guess, I would like to see in a future piece. One would be a way for new people who were not previously registered to register for short-term rental based on changes in circumstances, not in a sale of property. And I think that was, the other one, there seemed to be a lot of confusion for people around the meaning of, I believe it was section H that was being discussed. So I think fleshing that out a bit more and maybe having it a separate section and having the boards be collectively on target or on board with it. I think the change up of the FinCom sort of confused and flustered people. And so, of course, an approach that everyone's in alignment with, or the majority. It's hard to get everybody online. And so those are my comments. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. I have one other hand up online, Megan Perry.
Thank you, Dawn. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to thank every member of the community that came out to both the site visit and to court the other day during the appeal of the hack decision that's being done by Nantucket Tipping Point and Nantucket Land Council. I noticed there weren't any select board members there or any legal counsel. So I just wanted to point out, again, it was mentioned that financing for this project is contingent upon all appeals being settled. So it's a good thing that there are still 2 appeals out there, because that is leverage for being able to negotiate something that might work out for the entire community. So that was it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. If there's no other public comments, we will move on to approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts.
I make a motion to approve the minutes and the warrants, because I have a couple contracts I want to talk about.
Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 No roll call tonight.
Aye.
That carries unanimously.
Yeah.
Right.
And then on to pending contracts.
Question on the first one is C click fix. And I've been here long enough to remember that Cara, when she was the DPW director, put that in place. And it wasn't in place, I don't think, all that long. We were getting overwhelmed, and then we weren't answering, I believe, were the 2 things. So I would like to make sure that we, if before we do that we're ready to do it. If that's the.
I can speak to my experience. I've reported 2 things to the DPW and they've been acted on within days.
Through this process?
Yep.
All right. We're good. Then I'm happy there, but
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, I just wanted to make sure it's something new but they are doing it.
Yeah, no, extremely responsive.
What's that? Yeah, good. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm happy
And
there.
another, did you have another one?
Yeah, the other one is the habitat. I think that should have been a separate discussion. I support habitat. I support them building houses, but I think that what we haven't done is what I've asked for the last couple times. We have given them town property. We don't have a site plan or sort of an idea of what we're doing here. We don't have a policy. Are we going to be doing rental homes? Are we going to be targeting them to town employees? Are we going to be, what are we doing on this property? the original, and I know what Habitat's doing, and we'll talk about it, but the original, and this isn't anything to do with Habitat, this has to do with the town. Understanding, we don't have to know exactly what we want to do on this entire property, but we have to have an idea. Last time I spoke about this, I I was told, oh, well, we have Matt McEachern and he's gonna be doing a site plan, and then you'll have the confidence that you want to have Matt. And I'm like, great, that's fine. But he still hasn't done it. And I said, I wanted the whole plan, and oh, he's just doing this end. And I learned today that we aren't even doing this end yet. And so I just think that we have to be careful, because baked into these decisions are a lot of policy and a lot of things that we haven't discussed. And so what, I support this for tonight, or I'll be neutral and you guys will vote it tonight. But I'm just begging us to figure out, what are we going to do on this property? How are we going to build this so it looks really good? It's a place that anyone of us would want to live, that town employees, that we make a priority for town employees, so that we can have that all the different departments staffed and the school staffed. I hope that we don't just let this happen based on what other people want, but instead make it based on what is in the best interest of the town. And so I think that's why I wanted to bring this up. I feel like, anyway, when we first did this, we had this entire property was going to be cash positive, including the purchase price. And we've made choices here that have not brought in any income at all. And so I've got a long history here, and I feel as though, I support this tonight, but I'm just begging us to do that and then have that discussion. Thank you.
Tucker Holland.
Hi, Tucker Holland, Housing Director. Totally confused. I've never been a part of this property. The 19 acres that were acquired from the electric company was going to be a cash positive deal. That predates my role as Housing Director. I'm not really sure how that was ever contemplated. But with regard to the housing, this particular RFP was voted by the select board, I believe, to move forward last spring. An RFP was issued, consistent with the idea of developing those 3 additional lots, single family size lots that are at the far end of Waite Drive, adjacent to the 2 lots that Habitat has already developed, I would say very nicely. Housing Nantucket has done a rental property right across the street. So on the left-hand side, as you go down Waite Drive, at the end of the drive, there will be, with this current proposal, 8 single-family type homes, home ownership on that end. Then there will be right across the street, more or less, the 64 unit project rental, again, a town sponsored, select board sponsored project on the same side of the street where the rental property that Housing Nantucket owns is located. There are the lots along Tacoma Way that the town still would own, 8 lots that are in the process of being determined whether they might be rental or whether they might be ownership. But I think there's a general vision there that they should be serving municipal employees. And that's something that is, in the process of being developed. And again, the select board is aware and supported that some seasonal housing does need to go back here along Waite Drive. And there is presently the opportunity to develop 1 or 2 buildings there. So, that is the entire end of Waite Drive. And this has been a discussion for quite some time. And I think that the select board will recall that Habitat had come several years ago about wanting some additional property along Waite Drive next to the 2 lots they had developed at that point. And at that time, the select board had said that given where we were with the subsidized housing inventory, it was very important that if we were going to be using town-owned land, that anything in this location be eligible for inclusion on the subsidized housing inventory. And so the 64 unit project falls into that category. And the way that the RFP was designed for these additional lots also requires that. So Habitat had gone off and retooled some of their processes, working very closely with the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities to ensure that all of their projects going forward would qualify on the subsidized housing inventory. And we saw that first with the 3 units that they created over at Benjamin Drive. So I think, there's quite a bit of thought and quite a bit of discussion that has gone into what is going to be happening, certainly at that end of the neighborhood. I can't speak. I mean, obviously we're standing and sitting right here on the public safety facility site. I don't know that there are any plans to do anything different with that. But the part that probably remains TBD is where Plus is currently located and the parking lot in the rear. And I think that's part of a bigger conversation about possible consolidated town offices and so forth. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's something I wanted to point out.
That's really helpful, Tucker. And I mean, your recollection meshes with my recollection. And I'm just thinking that maybe it's time to bring this back for kind of an update on what the remaining decision points are on this property, what's already been built, what's already been is slated to be built. And I mean, I think that it really is what's happening over here where Plus is and what's happening along Tacoma mostly. But I think it's time to bring back in the map and have a board discussion on what the final kind of decision points are to round out this property.
And my point, and I understand everything, Tucker, what you said. I know that my point was previously, and my point is still sort of from these lots forward, what is the design pattern? How are we going to make it look? What is, what are we going to do from here to there? I mean, I just think, I think it's.
You're talking at this end of the.
Well, I'm talking from sort of say these 3 are going to go to these guys tonight. Let's assume that from that corner all the way over, what is it going to look like? How are we going to plan it? What's going to look like? How is it going to feel?
I think
and I think and Matt McEachran was, going to be bringing us pictures and he was doing certain things that last I brought this up, that was going to be the thing. We could sit around a table, but we need something to react to. And I think we have to think, what are the policies? What do we want to have happen here? I think my own opinion is I don't think a highest and best use over here is surface parking. So that's me. So, I think that property is going to be too valuable for town employee housing and or town property, town administration property. And so how is that going to be integrated? What are we going to do there? How are we going to ensure there's enough parking, on street and alongside all these buildings? And if we don't do that, from a design standpoint, from 5,000 feet when we start, it's not going to be right when we finish. And so that I think that there's a step that we've missed.
I disagree. I disagree with that.
You can.
But so this end of the street is to be determined for sure. And they're different ideas that really need to be considered at the select board level about, whether it is consolidated town offices, whether it is more housing, whether it is those are big decisions for this end of the street. That end of the street, we've talked about for quite a while, and it has consistently been the vision that as you get closer to Tacoma Way, the scale is smaller and representative, reflective of the residential neighborhood across the street. As you get further in, the 6 Fairgrounds Tacoma Green development, the scale gets a little bit bigger. Then we get to these buildings, which are the largest scale. What happens over here? I agree 100%. There's more to be discussed over here, but this end, I believe, is being developed in a methodical way.
And my only other comment, I can share it's going to be out of date, but I can share the P&L that was done by a developer 20 years ago, 25 years ago when we did this. I'll get it for you. I think I know where it is. but it's not, it's going to be out of date now. The numbers are going to be different, but I do have it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the pending contracts?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next up, Citizens Departmental Committee requests and reports. We have our fire chief here to give an overview and request for approval of a Nantucket Community Wildfire Protection Plan.
Thank you. Mike Cranston, I'm the fire chief. I also have with me Josh Nigro from the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Just to go over this plan quickly and ask for the select board's support in adopting the plan. This plan was developed back in 2018 by Northeast Forest and Fire Management LLC and all of the stakeholders that you see on the slide there. The plan was funded completely through DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And the goal of this plan is to basically to take a look at the entire island, including Tuckernuck, identify areas on the island where we need to do some management of vegetation to make people's houses and our properties safer overall. So you can go to the next slide. Thanks, Erica. So the National Wildlife Coordinating Group, it just defines the wildland urban interface, which is sort of the topic that runs through this entire plan as that area where human development, our homes, businesses directly intermingle with vegetation. And, when I say vegetation in this respect, I mean fuel. You can go forward, please. So again, it's mixed up into different categories. The category that concerns me the most is the category 2, which is our intermixed community. The neighborhood that comes to mind to me is like Tom Nevers. So this is where there's not a clear demarcation between people's properties and vegetation. The vegetation sort of grows right up close to the property. So part of the theme of this plan is to identify what individual homeowners can do and neighborhood groups can do to identify, be educated on this risk and make some changes and some improvements to harden their property. You can move forward, please. So again, the island for this plan was cut up into 12 different zones. You can go right actually to the next one, Erica, if you don't mind. So that's just how the island was set up into different zones. Each zone is listed throughout the plan, identified what the hazards are in that particular zone and what the specific recommendations are to improve those areas and reduce the risk of wildland fire. There's both, one-time recommendations and annual recommendations as well. And as we get into the next few slides, I'm going to ask Josh Nigro from DCR to actually comment on it because he's had a direct role throughout this entire plan. Obviously, I've only been here for a year, but what I can tell you is coming in from the outside, not knowing much about Nantucket when I got here, this plan for me was very, very helpful. I was able to look at each part of the island and really identify what problems or potential problems exist. So just for that reason, I found the plan very valuable. And I think this plan being adopted and being in effect going forward will help anybody who comes into the town, even if it's not just the fire chief, but some other, department head or entity could take a look at this plan. And it's really a good roadmap to improving the safety of the island. Josh.
Good evening. My name is Josh Nigel. I'm the District Forest Fire Warden for the Department of Conservation and Recreation. I cover Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and the island of Nantucket. So some of the recommendation is to incorporate the Firewise practice, which is people hardening their home. And part of that is actually going out and doing home assessments and giving homeowners some recommendations. Through the plan, a couple areas that were recommended were Tuckanuck Island, where we actually went out and me and my staff with the Nantucket Fire Department assessed over 30 homes on Tuckanuck and gave reports to each of those homeowners of what they can do to better protect their homes. We've also done the same process in Nantucket with the Nantucket Land Trust. Dealing with them, we did about 25 home assessments there and looked at their open space also. And with that plan, actually gave them some recommendations where they actually did some mowing behind their homes. And they're actually doing their phase 2 this week to connect it out to the bike path. So one of the important pieces of this plan was implementing those fuel treatments for an organization like Nantucket Land Trust, not really knowing where the concern was, where they should really focus their energy. So by using the plan, they were able to do that, look at the science, look at the information from the plan, and they were able to get the approvals through their boards for the money to be able to support that project. So it is plans already being used. Implement fuel treatments. So we also talk about prescribed fire, but also just mowing. So the Conservation Foundation has done a lot of work out in the Alta Rock area against Tom Nevers. So that's part of that. And installing and maintaining fuel breaks. So one of the pieces of this plan is for any of the landowners on the island to be able to kind of take a look at that and say where are the areas that they're most concerned about and to be able to do that. People don't know what they don't know. So part of this plan is actually doing that education piece. And then conducting prescribed burning to reduce wildfire risk. The only organization right now on the island doing that is the Nantucket Land Bank for their pieces of properties, but continuing that as a viable way to treat fuels and maybe getting it onto some of the other properties on the island. Next slide. So part of those annual recommendation is improved wild suppression capabilities. One of the keys nationally to successful fire programs is aggressive initial response to the fires. So implementing wildland fire focused training, which we've been a very big partner with Nantucket Fire Department for the longest time, doing those yearly in-service trainings, bringing nationally training that, which we call our 130, 190, which is our basic wildland fire training, getting everybody within the Nantucket Fire Department trained at that national level, which we've been working on. We did chainsaw classes. We did a urban interface class, which is teaching firefighters how to respond to wildfires. So, and even chainsaw training. So we're going to continue that. And then those firefighters can learn from lessons learned across the country. And evaluating fire apparatus to ensure needs of Nantucket is another recommendation. You know, we don't have, you know, a lot of equipment here on the island. So in case a big wildfire happened, does the department have those pieces of equipment? Firefighters trained to be able to use them. So Nantucket has done great over the years through that. One of our programs that we oversee through the Department of Conservation is our Federal Excess Property Program, which Nantucket Fire Department has taken advantage of very well with the 2 wildland fire tenders, the 2 tanker trucks, the brush breaker, a couple of Humvees. Those are all through that program to be able to better respond for a wildfire on the island. And then some other things, improve water supply to decrease fill times and increase the amount of available water. Some of the areas through the plan have looked at certain areas that need a little bit more help. So that's being done. Develop fire department policies and procedures specific to wildland fire. That's through that NWCG. There's national goals and just things that we need to do that's being done the same way across the country. So there's one standard for wildfire. So it's not just Nantucket doing its own thing, keeping to that same standard for response. And next one. And then decrease fire dangerous community through fuel and hazard mitigation. This is one of the big ones. Improve and maintain fire breaks throughout the island. Implement fuel treatments in areas of high fire danger risk. Again, a lot of people on the island didn't really understand where those areas were, but after going through this plan, it really pinpoints those big areas that we really need to be concerned with and what we can do to better protect it. And then maybe implement some more prescribed fire or mowing, cutting brush, mowing it down, things like that. And next one. And then this is the biggest one that really is the reduced structural nightability through the Firewise measures. Really getting the homeowners involved to be able to better protect their homes. Obviously, if you look at some of the large wildfires across the country, they put a fire truck in every driveway. Obviously, that's something that would not be able to be done right here on Nantucket. So anything that the homeowner can do to better prepare their house, because it's not that big wall of flame coming out of the woods burning the house down. It's going to be those embers that are generated from the fire. So you might think you're good because you don't live right next to the edge, but even a mile or two downwind, you're going to get those ember receptors. So doing those Firewise home assessments, getting the homeowners to take buy-in and be able to better protect their houses, a huge thing. And through that CWPP has really kind of narrowed it down. So fire prevention with DCR can be able to pinpoint those neighborhoods that we need to do a lot of public outreach in. And then develop a process to allow property owners to implement Firewise on forest lands within the home mitigation zone, which we are doing through our home assessments. And I do believe the Nantucket Land Trust is actually going to be we're going to work with them to be able to actually get Firewise to be certified as a Firewise community. And there's only 4 other towns or communities within the state of Massachusetts that are. So they've been doing a lot of work and should be recognized for what they've done.
So I would just like to say another important part of that is that going through this plan, sitting down at the table with all the stakeholders and actually talking about what would we do tomorrow on Nantucket if we had a wildfire breakout has been really valuable to us as a fire department. There's a lot of different entities involved with the land bank having some fire suppression apparatus. The airport has been a valuable teammate with this as well. It's the Mass State Police, the individual homeowners, obviously, and the neighborhood association. So I think this has been really good in the sense it's brought everyone together. And I think it's really important. And I ask for your support with this.
Yeah, I have a question. Is that right?
Yes,
Yep.
go ahead. Matt.
Yep. When you guys did that process, did you identify the fire breaks and where they should be and who owns them and who's responsible for maintaining each of them?
We have, and I believe, I don't want to speak for Josh, but routinely we go around and check them. And we just today, as recently as today, we have gone out and looked at some and thought about, do we need to cut this back or do we not need to cut this back?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did when we looked at the plan, we didn't look at ownership.
Right.
At first, we didn't look at the lines of who owns what. We looked at the fuel, we looked at the hazards and looked at that and then kind of figured out where those were. The other thing about this plan, once it's adopted, Biden's infrastructure, that $8 million piece, the 2 things that are being prioritized for funding is having towns write CWPPs or implementation of recommendations from CWPPs. So now that if the plan was adopted, then the town of Nantucket would be eligible for money from the federal government to be able to implement some of these large projects. Yes, and then the other thing that this plan has also done as far as MEMA and the community hazard analysis, this is added to the wildfire piece of that town plan for the hazard mitigation piece for wildfire.
Great. Any other questions or comments, Malcolm?
It's very nice. I have one. Was the one aspect of all of this of our fire prevention or outside of town, as this plan really focuses on, what do you really worry about? What's the one thing we need to do better at? I mean, what keeps you up at night?
Well, I think access and education, like I feel like a lot of people own these properties that have vegetation and potential hazards close to them, and they don't realize that that a risk exists because of that. So I think education is number one. I'd also like to make sure that we have access to places, which makes the fire breaks, they're not only fire breaks, but they also provide a means of access for us to get in and sitting down at the very least yearly with all of the stakeholders and running through a tabletop and going out with the land bank and doing a prescribed burn and saying, okay, if things went bad right now, what would we do? and being able to sort of real time test it, I think is probably the most
Yeah.
important thing.
It seems to me you have the cooperation of the organizations, but you mentioned education of individual homeowners. I don't think a lot of people watch us on Wednesday nights, and the message, how are you getting the message out? What are your plans for education?
So there is going to be a link on the town's website, so people can go onto the town website and look at the plan. But what we've done, like recently, we had a community wildfire preparedness day out at the Tom Nevers Fields. We brought all of our equipment out there. We brought copies of the plans. We had a sign up list of people to sign up to have a plan emailed to them if they'd like to see, have an actual copy of it. So we've done that. When Josh was there, every organization was represented as far as the stakeholders go, and they were able to speak to the public individually and tell them their own perspective on what their role is in keeping the island safe, and then also telling the individual people what they can do to protect their particular home.
Thank you.
And then the other piece of that plan is within the plan is designating those areas where we know that there's risk. So the fire prevention officer can then take a look at that plan. Do we need to go out and do a day of knocking on doors, giving out information, being there? And then the other thing is getting those community spark plugs, the ones that are really going to rejuvenate their thing. So with Nantucket Land Trust, there was one person out there who is from California. So he understands the risk being from California, has a house here. So he was able to really get his whole neighborhood group involved to be able to really push it through. The same thing on Tuckernuck, another person there, that spark plug, as we call it, to be able to really get that community together. So we need to find those people on the island within the community to kind of rally their neighborhoods.
Okay. Are we ready to approve the plan? Is there a motion?
A motion to adopt?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you for all your work on this. Next up, we have the town manager's report, continued preliminary review of town sponsored warrant articles for 2024 annual town meeting.
Thank you. So, you guys can hear me okay, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Erica's got up the outline number 3 for the potential warrant articles for the 2024 annual town meeting. And I wanted to bring you through the highlighted items. These are some items that have either been updated or have been added or need some direction. So general bylaws. I think the end result about paid parking for at least the 2024 annual town meeting was not to proceed with developing a warrant article because we need additional information, which we do not presently have. E-bikes and e-scooters. So I did a little bit of follow-up on this, and it seems as though the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee is not preparing a specific article for the 2024 annual town meeting. However, they are going to be seeking some legal advice on something to do with e-bikes and e-scooters, but I don't have it yet. They're working on that. So we probably can take that off unless anybody wants to somehow pursue it. The noise bylaw, I just need a little direction on this. As I had indicated when the potential warrant articles were first brought up, there have been some comments, pretty routinely over the years, but more recently at the Nantucket Civic League annual forum this summer and at the 2023 Wisconsin Civic Association annual meeting. The Brant Point Association has brought it up as to potential changes to the noise bylaw, specifically with regard to what is allowed during the summer. So I will need to know at some point soon, or rather than later, what your thoughts are on if we're going to change anything there. The rental car bylaw changes. We've requested some review and amendments from town council to address the surplus rental vehicle medallion issue and the Turo issue. And I think Brian may be working on that. Home rule petitions. This is just more of an update. It was a little bit unclear when the outline was first developed whether or not these home rule petitions need to be revoted and resubmitted at the 2024 annual town meeting, and it is now we've now been advised they will all need to be revoted. The Community Housing Bank article will probably need some language changes to, I think, if Tucker's still there, to correspond with the statewide legislation. And updates since it was first introduced in 2016. Because some things have changed. And then some new items, or actually these were just new articles category, but some updates. Coastal resiliency districts, we are waiting on a draft of those from town council. We are also reviewing the parameters of betterments as the board requested. I've just added Grove Lane to the next item, the conveyance of paper road, because I had forgotten to put that in. That's a request from the land bank. The year-round housing deed restriction program, I think we are waiting on the Affordable Housing Trust to provide something on that. And when the board had a discussion about seeking special legislation to establish a licensing board, I think the end result on that was to hold off until we can see if our new separate monthly meeting is working out. Real estate related, we've been requested to add a grant of easement to National Grid so that we can install EV charging stations at the Surfside Beach parking lot. They require easements when they need to extend electrical service to somewhere. The board, I think, is still considering the potential compensation increase for select board members. And as you all know, the citizen warrant article deadline was Monday at 4 p.m. We have received 29 articles. I think Erica was working on getting them scanned and posted today. All of the signatures have been certified. They will go to town council if they haven't already, as soon as they are compiled, and they will undertake their so-called triage review as to the legality of these. And I will talk to Brian Riley a little bit later about this offline, but we're hoping that we can have some review of these articles either at your next meeting on November 29th, but probably more likely at your meeting on December 6th. I think we did that last year. So that is what I wanted to mention. And if maybe there's anything you are able to give direction on now, that would be helpful.
Okay, Tucker's at the mic.
I just was going to add to what the town manager said, that we were likely going to want to have our home rule petition on there again, given what's happening with the governor's bill and some differences between that and our own presently.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that it should definitely go up, and that bill should go up amended if it needs to be slightly, just so that they know that we haven't given up.
Well, and I think the idea is that we could potentially pre-opt in if a statewide enabling legislation passes, so that we don't have to wait another year to opt into it if that's required at the state level.
Yeah, and we did include that provision the last time we voted on, but we want to look at everything and make sure that it's tight with what the governor is proposing. But just I wanted to mention, Matt, they know we haven't forgotten. We went and testified yesterday. Our current home rule petition was heard by the Joint Committee on Revenue, and I want to particularly thank Peter Burke for submitting some testimony on behalf of the chamber in support of that. But the main action probably is around the governor's bill, but it was good to, as you say, let them know that we haven't forgotten.
Okay, yeah.
And on select board compensation, I did commit to doing some research on other communities, and I'll be working on that over the holiday.
Okay, does anybody have any?
Oh, I just
Erica?
wanted to note that I did finish the citizen warrant articles, and Florencia is in process of uploading them to the website tonight, so they will be available for all the community members or anyone to review online. And they were emailed to everybody as well.
Yeah,
All
I
our
just
town people.
saw those. Do we have any information from BPAC? And scooters? No, nothing.
Meeting, I think the last one was canceled.
Okay.
Meeting on Friday afternoon.
Okay.
So I'll find out if it's in anywhere.
What about the noise bylaw? Did anyone have any thoughts on that? On whether we want to make any further amendments? or propose any further amendments.
I would be curious what the history of, if Matt, do you like what's been brought up, tried, and because there was an amendment at town meeting not that long ago, right? And it was to shrink the hours somewhat in the evening, right? Was it start later, end earlier?
Brooke, yes, it was something like that. I think that was at the 2022 annual town meeting. And there have been some other attempts to do things like no construction noise on Sundays, or the allowance for the noise to be later on in the morning, have a later start. And some of this stuff just doesn't pass a town meeting.
Yeah, Sunday is later, and we tightened up hours a little bit, and I think we added something about heavy construction noise, or differentiated it.
Yeah, now it's 8 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. for construction noise. And I will just note too, in our office, the biggest complaints we get is construction in the summer. Most people have the misconception that construction is not allowed during the summer months. And I think that just comes from back in the day, people just didn't do construction in the summer. And so now with more and more construction happening, people are more offended by it. So we routinely have to explain to them what the noise bylaw is, and that construction is allowed unless there's projects under a special permit. So
I think it's a special permit, and I also think that there was, if it wasn't, a written town rule, it was just courtesy that people followed, that they didn't construct in the summer periods. It was, maybe it wasn't a real rule, but it was sort of an unwritten rule that is no longer followed. There was sort of 100 days where you respected your neighbors and didn't do it. And maybe it was easier then because people were only here for a shorter period, but it's clearly not what we're doing now. When a couple times people have come to me and asked advice, like, it's so crazy, it's so noisy, what am I gonna do? And I warn them, I say, don't bring it to town meeting. Don't open this can of worms, be happy with what you have now. And I forgot I even said that. And after the last meeting, where they wanted to change it and it actually got loosened a little bit, they came and they reminded me, oh, Matt, you told us not to do that. So I think people who are concerned about it should think about it, because there's a process that goes through that might actually give them opposite of what they're hoping to have happen. So, I think it's tough.
Well, and the other thing I'd like to point out is people's livelihoods depend on work. And the expectation that people could stop working for 3 months in the summer with the cost of living on Nantucket is just no longer possible. Folks need to earn a paycheck to pay their rent and feed their families. And so that exists as well.
Yeah, I think that there were often restrictions in the past through the zoning board of appeals, where they would be a part of the permit for that type of a special permit. So that, I think that brought up the misconception that like there could be no construction in town in the summer because so many of those buildings were governed under that. And I mean, we are just more developed than we ever have been. And it's not even necessarily new construction, it's maintenance, it's reshingling, it's painting the exterior, which can only be done when it's warm enough. That's a lot of noise, but with sanding and so forth. But I mean, I guess I'd be looking for a little bit more feedback on what might be palatable to people aside from nothing all summer, which just it's not feasible. I mean, it would never pass anyway.
Yeah, my guess is I don't think anyone is offended by a painting crew that comes in for a week or 2 weeks. I think what is impacting these neighborhoods, and I've seen it impact Cliff Road, the houses get done and 3 or 4 years later, they're redone again. And it's a whole nother set of, 20 cars and 20 trucks parked everywhere and, going from early till late because they have to get the job done on time. because it has to be done by summer and it's everybody doing it to each other, so it's sort of, I think, I don't know. I don't have an answer to it, but I do know it's the major projects. If someone's coming in to paint or whatever, it is what it is, but some of this is a lot more than that. So that's
Okay. Well,
the other,
we're going to continue this.
yeah, the other issue that is, I think that this board should try to find a way. There's 3 different short-term rental articles, I think, that citizens have all proposed. And I think that we should find, I haven't read them all. I don't know what they are. People were asking me what they are the very next day, and we hadn't even got the articles in yet. But I think that we should show leadership and try to find something that bridges the differences. I believe at town meeting, if there had not been changes made by a planning board request and at the FinCom, I think that Article 1 would have passed. And I wished it had, because even though there were some things that had to be fixed, I think those could have been done administratively or next year. And we would only be talking about, is it a primary, or how do we define it? Do we define it as primary or accessory? Is what we'd have to worry about now. I think that the short-term rental work group was, 95% there and had a lot of good stuff that could be simplified a little bit and brought back in a way that would be palatable. And so I think, my hope is that we would show that leadership and do that and talk to some of the squeaky wheels and talk to some of the other groups and try to bring something that, that people are unified over. And I don't think that's what, I think that we tried to do that, and I think it got undone in the home stretch. So between now and the spring, I hope that there's 3 or 4 of us could decide, could work toward doing that.
My thought on short-term rentals is maybe we start with the lowest hanging fruit, which seems to be I think that the thing that has the most consensus is the idea of the growth of corporate ownership of short-term rentals. And maybe we start with a small bite rather than try to do too much, because what I observed in the process is that there are constituencies for whom it's never going to be enough, and constituencies for whom it's always going to be too much. And I don't know where we find even a majority in the middle, especially when those who have strong opinions tend to come to town meeting. And I talked to a lot of people who really couldn't muster the interest enough, because it wasn't affecting their lives directly, to come and represent that middle ground of compromise that was missing last Tuesday. So maybe we start really small and move on from there over time. I was disappointed.
And Madam Chair, I think it's our responsibility, period. A lot of effort's been made. There's been articles every year. We had a working group, and I think it's going to have to be the 5 of us that'll come up with something that's palatable to everyone.
Yeah, interestingly, I had a couple different, 2 or 3 people different contact me and they described their situation, and you can't take my rights away, and it's not fair, and on and on. And I could barely get an, and these a couple of them I've known forever. I could barely get a word in edgewise, and finally they let me talk. And I'm like, you're exempt. You're complaining about something that doesn't apply to you. It does. My daughter says it does, and on and on. And then I copy and paste the thing and send it to them. Like, oh, I didn't read that. I didn't know. It was so long. I didn't understand. And so, one was a hosted stay. Another one was a stay in their own house, that they, they have one house and they stay at the other. You guys weren't going to be affected at all. And so I think some of this was, some of the disinformation, people were spewing, trying to get their point, get their self-interest, get their point across. And I think that the short-term rental group they had to spend so much time trying to explain why they supported part of our position and not all of our position, and what was right and wrong with the FinCom, that they didn't have a chance to explain what the article actually did. And if we could go in, arm in arm with, a few different groups in agreement, I think it would have a lot better chance. So anyway.
One of the citizens articles I was just scrolling through does apply to corporate ownership. Anything else tonight on? Oh, sorry, Tom.
No problem. Yeah, I agree. I agree that we probably should do at minimum a bite-sized approach for what the most popular and or least controversial parts of Article 1 were. From everything that we've heard from the short-term rental work group and our select board meetings on that, and at a minimum, provision J, the corporate part, natural persons, the article, provision K, which is may not be operated in a deed restricted unit, and L, only be allowed in detached single family dwellings, accessory or residential garage apartments, etc. And possibly some of the definitional stuff seems to me very low hanging fruit and non-controversial. Definitely open for, of course, discussion on whatever the board thinks, but at a minimum, and also considering what Provincetown just passed 2 weeks ago, which was a ban on fractional ownership, which was very non-controversial. Their town meeting their article only had about 10 negative votes from what I understand. But they decided not to do zoning piece. They also decided to take a different tact, but they use very similar language to what we're using in the Great Barrington language. So I agree. I agree with my colleagues that we should at least start with those provisions in Article 1.
And I think the fractional would be a really good idea. I heard strong support for that when that happened recently. So
They are waiting on review by the Attorney General of their articles. And so I think part of whether or not they're acceptable by the Attorney General will drive. And my understanding is that fractional ownership piece may be the more risky one to get approval by the AG. So we would know, and hopefully we'll know in plenty of time whether or not to present something like that.
Is it okay if I take a question or a comment? Rick Atherton has his hand up. Rick, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. I'm listening to your discussion, and I hope you'll consider as a board recommending that Article 2, the article brought forward by essentially the planning board, not come forward next year. And I think your discussion on what are the appropriate possible restrictions or controls, if I can use that word, in Article 1 need to come forward without Article 2. And I hope you will consider and discuss that matter with the members of the select board. Otherwise, my concern is you're going to be right back where you are today. So thank you, Dawn.
Thanks, Rick.
yeah,
Matt?
that was the other thing I forgot to bring up is I think that's a good suggestion that Rick is making. So I think that whole issue, there is a way to define it as accessory. John Giorgio told that to Dave Iverson and I, and then it changed between when he talked to us the day before till the next day. I think Brookline, there's a city or two that are doing it as accessory. And I think if we bring it back, we should bring it as accessory defined or not bring it at all. I think we made a huge mistake not at least having a show of hands to give direction to the staff, to everybody, by how many people are in favor of accessory, how many want it as a primary. And we didn't take that opportunity at town meeting, which is unfortunate. As soon as we didn't do that, I thought, I wish I had thought about it quick enough. It had already passed, but right after it, it had passed and we moved on, I thought, boy, we should have just had a quick show of hands and seen, because I think people feel pretty strongly and a 2/3 vote is going to be very difficult. But I think, if we could come to a consensus on a accessory, I think that could pass. So.
Anything else on, we'll be continuing to discuss this until we set the warrant. So shall we, go ahead, Brooke.
I think it's really important. I would like to encourage BPAC to move forward with the e-bikes and e-scooters. I mean, it's something that has been, we're not talking about it as much now because winter's coming, but it's gonna rear its ugly head again in the spring around safety. And I think what's less clear to me is what we're permitted to do based on the state and what they have and haven't done. I mean, we obviously can't get ahead of what the state will allow us to regulate. But I really would love to know what is possible. If nothing else, the things I think about are, requiring helmets for minors on e-bikes and e-scooters, just making sure that some of that stuff is tightened up. And I think that there's some small pieces we might be able to take a town meeting, and I really would love to see BPAC present some more details for us.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was wondering if on that same issue, if other towns have regulations that have already been put in place that we could copy.
So I did some preliminary research with the Mass Municipal Association, and really there's a lack of clarity at the state level. And I don't think many municipalities are acting because of that. Interestingly, they put in regulations for the class 1 and class 2 e-bikes and punted on class 3, which are the ones that are throttle controlled, which I find a little ironic because those are probably the most risky and the ones that are creating more of the headache, or for me, the fear around children who don't have driver's licenses basically driving a motor vehicle in some ways. So because they didn't address it, it doesn't really give us, my understanding is it doesn't give us a lot of room to regulate. So we're sort of in that middle ground between when the state catches up. Or we have to do a home rule, I think.
There's a bicycle advocacy guy that we speak to. He's part of the state or a nonprofit. I'm not sure which, but he is on top of it and has talked to BPAC a few times and has some ideas. We did a couple years ago, we voted 3 feet, 3-foot distance for a car to pass, and the state very much after that, right after that, made it 4 feet. So it's illegal to be within, you're not supposed to pass or tail somebody closer than 4 feet, which when you're behind them, people probably are not 4 feet away, but a lot of the passing is closer than 4. And so if you can't get around someone with, without giving them a biker without giving 4 feet, you should stay behind them. And I don't think that that's very much known, here. I don't think people know what the state law is. Maybe the new drivers are going to be taught this, but I think existing drivers don't understand it necessarily. And bikers are also allowed to drive 2 abreast, and people think, you get yelled at. If you drive 2 abreast down the road, you get yelled at. But that's, there's certain weird things like that. I'm not suggesting to do that, and I wouldn't do that. But I think there's, there are things in there that are sort of interesting.
So I think we should consider maybe putting an agenda item and giving BPAC an opportunity to come and present to us on what they're learning in time for us to do something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe at your next meeting.
I will bring that message.
Okay.
The other
Great.
thing BPAC is working on is the signs and, having signs and all that, stop sign pollution and the unclarity. They really are trying to work their way through that. So.
Okay. Anything else we want to touch on tonight on ATM articles for 2024?
I'm just wondering, we struck the paid parking for more information. Seems like every year we need more information. When are we going to have information?
Well,
Sorry, we need somebody to really get focused on this. And we've been focused on many, many other things. Also at the board's strategic planning session last November of 2022, it was deprioritized as an item for town administration to focus on. So we weren't focusing on it. And now that we have our transportation planner back, we are working to get back to it. But hopefully within the next few months, but probably not well enough in advance of town meeting to be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think we need to get some kind of an update going on this again soon with Mike Burns.
Okay, thank you.
Just a thought, just on that point, Don, I think one of the things we could do on a topic like this and on other topics is we could put them, 3 times a year, 4 times a year. And, say, okay, this is what we're doing. We'll be back and sort of put, if we, sort of like we've done, we used to have, the departments had a tough time budgeting 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15. Brian got here. We made it a monthly, a monthly focus, and then the budgets are in really good shape now. You hear that, Brian? Yeah, they're in really good shape. And so that same theory could work on other issues other than just budgets. That could work on, how are we doing? How, sort of just keeping on track. I just think from our, I think sometimes asking someone to come in and present and say, this is what we've worked on so far. Here's who's doing it. This is what we're doing, this quarter. Let's see what we get. I think that to me would be a way to get some of these other issues that are a little stuck, unstuck. And it still might take a couple of years because this is sort of a third rail, but it's a really important part of the entire transportation, mechanism. And I think that it's, something that, that we could think of another way of doing it. All right.
One of the reasons the idea of having a separate meeting for licensing and petitions was to free up more time for these kinds of collaborative conversations with other boards and to make sure we're moving along in our strategic priorities. I mean, the question is paid parking a strategic priority? My recollection from our strategic planning was we've collected a whole lot of data from the license plate readers, but we haven't had anyone available to look at it, to tell us what it means in terms of helping support a decision for paid parking, because I think it's pretty controversial. And I think it would be really helpful to do those analytics of the data if that's helpful, to persuade myself and others as to the value of it in Nantucket terms rather than theoretically, if that makes sense, Matt.
It makes sense. I mean, it is not the highest priority, but it is a controversial issue, as you correctly point out, because it's, oh my God, when I first came here, like 30 years ago, I remember there was always discussion about that. And I think we just can't let it slip. And I would like discussed again soon.
Okay. To be continued.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just in general on issues such as e-bikes and e-scooters, my recollection is that our legislative delegation hasn't been here in a while. And maybe in the new year, maybe we can invite Rep. Fernandez and Senators here to make themselves available to answer questions for us on such issues, if possible.
No, that would be great. Maybe we could actually invite them now to get something on their calendar in January or February. Okay. Next up, we were going to do under select board reports, a follow-up from our special town meeting.
So on this, I think we are pulling up the list of warrant articles. So I try to develop a little kind of follow-up actions list after every town meeting. And some of this needs to be a little bit updated from when I put it out last week. So Article 1 and Article 2, we know there's no action to be taken because they weren't passed. So I heard what the board was just discussing about the potential of putting forward something. And I guess we'll have to figure out how to develop that. Maybe town admin could work a little bit with Brooke or Tom, or I'm not sure. Or you all have some additional discussion specifically at an upcoming meeting and we put the article, whichever article you want to focus on the screen and figure out how to get at it. So I don't know, something like that. So, but it sounds like I've already added it to the 2024 annual town meeting potential article list. Article 3, which was the adoption of a mass general law to impose a community impact fee on professionally managed short-term rentals. That was adopted. That will become effective, I believe, on January 1st, 2024. And we're trying to determine some additional information about it, like what contracts does it specifically apply to? How are people notified? And we're just early in the process of figuring out those types of answers.
Yeah, Libby, before you move on, Penny Ty is on, and I think that she wanted to voice some of those questions from the real estate community.
Sure.
Penny, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Thank you. Thank you, Dawn. So I've been in close contact with the Department of Revenue, and I'm getting very conflicted information from them. Additionally, we were told initially that this would go into effect July 1st, 2024. I talked to the attorney today for the Mass Association of Realtors, and he said that the law was written by people who don't understand short-term rentals. There are questions specifically about the way the legislation is written. The funds are to be collected and paid by the owner. The language is very similar to the short-term rental tax that's now 11.7%, 5.7% to the state, 6% to Nantucket. That is not paid by the owner. It is paid by the tenant. Nobody's been able to give me a clear answer on who's to pay this 3%. The attorney says that the owner can pass it on to the tenant. DOR doesn't care where it comes from, just simply that it's paid. If that happens, it will now cost 14.7% for somebody visiting Nantucket who rents on a short-term basis, which is very expensive. So we would appreciate some sort of consistent guidance on this, maybe through town council, if possible. The other thing there's been inconsistency on is what constitutes ownership. We were told by somebody at DOR that I could own a home in my name and a second home in the same community in an LLC and not be subject to this. That's not what the attorney for MAR said. So lots of conflicting information, and we'd appreciate your help in getting something consistent so that we could understand it better. Thank you.
Yeah, what Penny
Matt?
just described is some of the concerns that people had with the definition of corporations and the workaround in total. You know, this is a subset of the short-term rental group we're talking about charging 3% the professionally managed, but there's still, the talk of, well, it's going to be natural persons. Well, there's some workarounds to that depending who you talk to. So those are the things when we talked about, when we were saying, let's bring this forward, but let's stress test it. That stress testing really never happened. I think it's important whatever article is brought forward is stress tested and understood. And so I think that's, and I'm glad that Penny is doing it on this aspect.
Oh, Penny, did you have another comment?
Oh, no, sorry, lowering my hand.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of confusion on this one. Carry on, Libby.
Thank you. I don't know if Brian Riley is able to respond to those questions.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Well, I can't speak for DOR. There's actually at least one aspect of this that I'd like to talk to somebody there and hopefully not get too conflicted. I was able to kind of dive into this, and I do have an opinion on what contracts it would apply to. Some of the other issues, I don't know if I have a good answer, but I can address that if you like.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so this statute, 64G, Section 3D, which is the community impact fee, sort of getting tacked on to the room occupancy tax. So that statute was signed by the governor on December 28th of 2018. And part of the act where that came in expressly said that this is only going to affect a, quote, transfer of occupancy, in other words, the actual tenancy of a short-term rental that commences on or after July 1, 2019, and which the contract was entered into on or before January 1, 2019. And that actually makes sense because until literally 2 days before January 1, 2019, the law wasn't on the books, hadn't even been approved yet. And the general rule for legislation is to that if it's going to have some kind of retroactive application, that needs to be stated, and it wasn't. In fact, it made very clear what contracts it applied to. But since then, there haven't been any amendments to the statute, no other acts which refer to what contracts it might apply to. And I was able to locate an advisory from Division of Local Services from 2022, which sort of states, you know, this is what this impact fee applies to, which units. And then it just repeats the language saying it only applies to tenancies or, you know, only applies to contracts after January 1 of 2019. And that has not been updated to reflect, well, what happens when a town adopts this impact fee later. And so based on what I found, at least today, my opinion is that if the tenancy is going to take effect in in 2024, and the payment is going to be made in 2024, it's my opinion that that this 3% will apply, even though the contract itself may have already been signed or maybe get signed in the next 6 weeks. Well, it's still 2023. There is a one wrinkle which I haven't figured out, and I'd like to ask DOR about, which is this: if hypothetically I rented one of these units for January of 24, and under that contract, I have to pay the whole rent before January 1. You know, what happens then? Is this 3% fee suddenly going to pop up afterwards? I don't know. That seems a little odd, but I'm not a tax attorney. But at least in terms of the normal ones, you know, tenancies which are going to happen next spring or summer, even though the contract may have been signed already, my opinion is that this 3% is going to be tacked on. And as was just said, you know, the Commonwealth is going to be looking for that 3%, whether it comes out of the owner's share, whether the owner tacks it onto the rent, I guess is the owner's choice. But that's what I was able to locate here so far.
Just another quick question for you. Can we, I guess I would call it, fix this at the annual town meeting? Because if these contracts, many for next summer, have been executed and deposits have been made and people have gone under a certain assumption that this 3% is not part of it. It seems really unfair to me.
No, I as a practical matter, yeah, as a practical matter, I fully understand that. You know, a town does have an ability. So this was a local acceptance statute, which was voted last week. A town does have an ability by a town meeting vote to rescind accepting a local acceptance statute. I believe the typical restriction though is that it's after it's been in effect for 3 years. But I could, that's certainly worth me taking a look at. There may be something
Well, and
different.
not
with
necessarily
these
rescind
statutes.
it, but to alter the effective date. So people are on notice.
Well,
That's what I was gonna offer as well.
yeah.
If we aren't ready,
You know, I think I did also spot in a local services advisory that under the normal course is you get town meeting to vote, and the town has to, you know, send in the vote and report what the effective date's going to be. I think at least 30 days before it would take effect, which would be December 1st of 23. If the town, this is off the top of my head, if the town does not file that with DOR till, let's say, next April, then maybe the tax, then maybe this 3% wouldn't actually formally take effect until July 1. That may be, you know, would DOR still recognize it being submitted 5 months late? I mean, I expect so. It still had a town meeting behind it. But that might be one way to address this question. I can certainly give that a little more constructive thought and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Penny Dye.
Sorry, it took a minute for the unmute button. I think one of the issues here is that there was no, in the article that we just voted, there was no date when this would kick in. Other communities that have done this, about half of them had an actual date certain, and there was a lot more clarity. So whatever we could do to fix this at the annual town meeting, I would certainly be in support of. Thank you for your time.
Can I give a follow-up on that, Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, the statute, or at least the way DOR interprets it, does allow you to set a future date. So you know, for example, you probably could have had, you know, will kick in on July 1, 2024. I think the default is without a specific date, it's going to take effect at the beginning of the next quarter that starts 30 days after DOR received notice. So that's why if that's filed now, it would take effect in January 1st.
Yeah, I think that the language that we kind of need, if it would be possible, would be contracts written after January 1st.
Exactly.
Brooke, did
I'll look into these all these sort of wrinkles and we'll try to give you, you know, an option or two on ways to address this, to address, you know, what we're talking about, which is perhaps, you know, not an equitable result for either the owner or the tenant, considering they didn't see it coming, and you may have contracts that are already signed.
Right. I mean, numerous contracts. It's just that, I mean, people,
Right.
the way Nantucket works is
Sure. Yeah.
many of the contracts are signed in 23 for the 24 summer season.
Understood. Yes.
Question for Penny. Would it make, how would the delay work? If we delayed it 5 months or 6 months, sent it in so it doesn't happen, you know, for another year, would that solve some of the concerns?
I'm
Yeah,
Penny.
I'm just trying to unmute here. Hold on.
You're good. Go ahead, Penny, and then I
Okay,
have someone else
you-
with their hand raised.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Well, that would be an enormous help in terms of planning. I can tell you this, when Don says lots of contracts, it's like 80% of the contracts have already been signed for 2024. And I can tell you that we are not retroactively going back and renegotiating contracts. It's just, that's not going to happen because it's not fair. So yeah, it would help if this did not go into effect until the following year and there was more clarity on not only the timing of all of it, but who is actually going to pay for this. Because the statute is not clear on that. Thank you.
Yeah, and the reality is you can't ask for more money from the tenants now. So
Oh,
the
no.
owner is going to be responsible, and they weren't counting on having another 3% fee when they agreed to their pricing. So it's just going to cause a lot of outrage. And it's also the split of who has to pay these and who doesn't. Because some houses will be subject to the 11.7 and some houses will be subject to 14.7, regardless of how you split it. Jody Patterson has a question or a comment.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
So my name is Jody Patterson. I am a real estate agent on the island and I work for a local brokerage. And I have these questions often from owners and tenants. There is a section on the mass.gov website specific to questions about room occupancy excise tax. And the section states planning for changes in local excise rates. Generally, the tax rates in effect at the time of occupancy apply to all rentals subject to room occupancy excise. Operators may want to include provisions in lease contracts stating that all state and local taxes and fees are as of the date of occupancy, so occupants will be prepared for possible increases due to rate or fee changes after a contract is signed. You can find more information about how to report and remit amounts collected in response to local rate changes in the regulation. That's something that my office does work into our lease contracts. And it's something that a lot of other homeowners that I've dealt with, if we didn't have it in our contract, would request, because there is always the chance that a rate may change after a contract is set in place. I can't speak to what it means if you don't have that sort of language in your lease contract. That would be beyond my scope. But that is something that is clearly stated on the state's website. And we took a look at this probably about a year and a half ago, when people started talking a lot about the water district fees and what towns were going to adopt that. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. There's also a section in Mass General Law 64G Section 3A that states, after they talk about when something like this would go into effect, it says the city or town in accepting this section shall not revoke or otherwise amend the applicable local tax rate more often than once in a 12-month period. Again, that's something that's beyond my scope and would be for legal to determine if a fee such as this is also applicable to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Brooke?
So my thought is, with Mr. Riley's suggestion that a delay in filing may buy us time to do a corrective article at Springtown meeting that establishes, we're not revoking the tax, we're just clarifying the implementation date. Would be my question. Can we do that? And if not, filing buys us that time. And if that's the case, we should do some serious public outreach. And then I would say, then we set contracts executed as of such and such a date.
Yeah, I think if we can delay it and just delay it and have it so it implements next year, I don't think there's a reason to bring it, and I think if we do bring it, we have to expect it's going to be opened up and something we don't want to happen may happen. So I think this is, I think it's pretty clear that, you know, this is to target multiple commercial units with multiple, and there's a clip, people were trying, the short-term rental work group was trying to make distinctions between those. The state has made distinctions between those. I would hate to have them all muddied up together again and lose it. So, you know, a lot of these are, you know, are competing with hotels, and those people are paying, hotels and inns who are paying a lot more in taxes. So I think this isn't, these are not, you know, these are not residents renting rooms in their houses or going away for a little while. These are professionally managed. So anyway, I would want to avoid the opening the can of worms if we can.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I completely agree. It was certainly not the intention of the short-term rental work group to have it apply not literally retroactively, but to things that those are supposed to be forward-looking and not giving the real estate community and the folks who rent, professionally managed unit or not, some kind of guidance beforehand seems way outside of anything that in our deliberations.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this was a little bit unintended, and I definitely appreciate the language that's suggested by Jody that's in the legislation, but I'm not sure that everyone has that in their contract, and even if they do, it wasn't the assumption by the parties involved. So I just,
You're not going to make friends going back and
it's not
asking them,
not going to go over well.
Exactly.
When you ask for 3% more money.
Your sandwich is 3% more. If you want to eat it, Tom, I'm going to charge you 3
So
cents.
we'll wait for some more information from you, Brian Riley.
Yes, I will. I know the issues and questions now, and I will track them down myself and also talk to DOR and see what options we may have here.
Okay, great.
Okay. I think that was the only article that I was asked to come on for.
Yes, I think that's all we need
Okay.
for this evening. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Nice to see you.
You too. Libby, do you want to continue going through?
Sure. Okay, so Article 4 was defeated, so no real need to talk about that, I don't think. Article 5 was a zoning bylaw, zoning map change for the airport. That was adopted, and that bylaw will be, or that map change will be sent to the Attorney General by the town clerk. Article 6 was a real estate conveyance issue involving the conservation area at Surfside Wastewater Treatment Facility, and we will administratively follow up on that. Real estate acquisition, these easements in the Lovers Lane area for the Surfside Transportation Project. We need to determine internally how to get at these easements, so we are working on that. The home rule petition will get sent to the legislative reps hopefully before the end of the month, and this was the acquisition of a bike path easement by the county for Somerset Lane bike path. Article 9 was the transfer of some general fund housing appropriation that was adopted, and we will be using the transferred funds, which were $1 million, to offset supplemental funding that is in Article 12, which I'll get to in a second. Article 10, the appropriation for the Novadear playing fields, which was adopted. We will be working with Parks and Rec manager and finance to develop the bid specs for that project, and we need to work on a timeline and all of the necessary things that are associated with a large project like that. Article 11, the supplemental appropriation for the South Valley pump station upgrades, which was adopted. Finance Director and Town Council are following up with a memorandum of understanding agreement with Richmond, and that will be coming to the board sometime soonish, I believe, next month or so. Article 12, the supplemental appropriation for town employee housing at Waite Drive. Since the funding from what was it, 9 helped supplement that, we now will be following up with our owner's project manager on the bid award, because we already have a bid in. That's how we got the number, and then project mobilization will start to occur. Article 13 had been sort of withdrawn by the airport, so no follow-up needed on that. 14, the national opioid settlement payments funds to be deposited into that. That's just a finance follow-up administratively. The Article 15, amending the description of the Public Works Facility Improvements Design location, and that had to be done because the money was very specifically for a particular location initially. This was approved. We'll be preparing a contract amendment to add this new location to the contract with our designer, and hopefully we will be getting ready to develop. Actually, you know what? I did want to spend a little time on this one. We're working on bid development to occur over the winter so that we can hopefully be ready for a construction appropriation at a yet to be scheduled, hopefully, special town meeting in the fall of 2024. And that was reviewed in the so-called large capital project collision presentation that we gave to the board in September. So we'll be coming back to you all on this probably in the next 2 or 3 months, but we hopefully will need to prepare ourselves for this item in a fall special. Article 16 is a real estate issue. It was adopted. We need to work this into our real estate project priorities. Article 17 was the elected official compensation schedule amendment. That's already been processed. Article 18, 19, and 20 were all citizen articles relating to sewer district amendments, and 2 of them were not adopted. One of them was the one that will be sent to the Attorney General and Town Clerk. And that is it for the follow-up, unless anybody has any questions about anything.
I have a question. I think I read that there's a citizen warrant article basically for spring that is the same as one of the sewer articles that wasn't adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Is there
allowed?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there's nothing else on that, do we have any committee reports this evening? I was just going to mention that I was in a meeting in regard to the design for our island home. SMRT was selected, and we just went over some of the things for moving forward at the Sherburne Commons site. And I think that the idea is to get the design work done with some collaboration of stakeholders, and to bring an appropriation to the 2025 town meeting. However, I think that we should kind of start the conversation with the community that the price tag is increasing pretty significantly on all construction, and not to be tied to any numbers that have been thrown around in the past.
Yeah, that's an example of what I discussed earlier, where I think there needs to be a regular update, regularly in front of people, and including, are we managing it well, and what are we going to do to ensure we can going forward? There's some building a building is the easy part, even though it's a ton of money and they might not vote for it. Operating it is the hard part. And so that's, I think we need to make sure that we're doing really well on that and get regular updates. So when the time comes, it passes.
Well, in the design discussion, there was definitely discussion about efficiency of operations of the building and energy certifications and so forth. Brooke?
Is housing part of that, contemplated as part of that package? Or are we just talking about the facility?
We're talking about the facility, but there may be some opportunities to collaborate on some additional employee housing on the site with Sherburne Commons. So that was brought up, but in terms of this currently, it's the facility itself.
I think it's a question that needs to be addressed in terms of the viability of operating a nursing home.
Yeah, that's one of our topics to discuss more with Sherburne Commons management.
Yeah, and so that people
and in this whole scope of the design.
Yeah, so we're comfortable that it's happening and will continue to happen in the community is. I mean, it's both things. Coastal resiliency, can I? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Met yesterday, day before. Daniel Patty and Susan Yu, Mass Waterways were two of the speakers. And they talked, the questions that Crack had, but also Comcom have had, is what happens with Chapter 91? What happens with existing structures that are rebuilt? Are they still required? You know, if there's been, sort of, if the water is now makes it so you can't pass, are they required to change it so you can? You know, Chapter 91 requires passage between the high and low water marks. And it was pretty interesting, but learned a couple things. Yes, it is still a requirement, and some of the older ones may not have specified it. So when they're re-upped, it should be added, but they also, you know, we said, well, who do we go to? And they said, well, at the Concom and or, you know, you can come to us, but at any time, if it's not doing what it's supposed to do, you can, you know, you can pursue it. The other thing that was interesting was that one good thing that came out of COVID is the Mass Waterways had a lot of time and they digitized a lot of the documents. In the past, when you'd ask, there's 31,000 Chapter 91 licenses across the state. And when you asked questions about them in the past, you know, when I'd go and ask here, they'd say, oh, it's really hard. We don't have it. We don't know. You have to go to Boston. And when you go to Boston, it's on these little cards and it's impossible to figure out and, you know, nothing we can do. But now what they're saying, it's not perfect, but they've digitized it all. And that was one of the positive things that are coming out. So, you know, I thought that was a worthwhile discussion. It answered some questions and hopefully gives us direction on some of those issues going forward. And I haven't looked at the digitization. I haven't like dug in and played around yet. There was a meeting prior with Concom and Natural Resources, and they were going to do a search of and pick everything that had Nantucket on it and send it to us. So we're going to get a data dump with all the Chapter 91 that have Nantucket on it to be able to actually manipulate it and see what's there and what is missing or not missing or what are we missing because we don't remember. So that was positive. The other one is I was online for the legislative hearing on the planning board article on Monday. And about half the residents showed up from Nantucket saying is nothing to see. There's no reason to do this. The other half said that we can do better and this is why it's good. The one thing that, which is kind of what we expect. The one thing that hit me though, is I've been up previously. We all think that the online, Zoom, et cetera, it's great. It gives everyone access. The way they're handling it in Boston now is it's really discouraging because when you went up before, you could go up and you're speaking on a specific article and you'd be speaking about, let's say you're speaking about an article, and if a legislator came in about any article that's on their agenda, they would interrupt you, they'd speak, and then they'd leave, and you go back to that regular article. And that, it was kind of, a little inconvenient at times, but they're doing it for the legislature, so you understand and you accept it, and you can keep your thought process on the article you're talking about. Now, because they've got people, now they have the legislators coming in, and they happen at the beginning and whenever they come through, and they're talking about any different article, but you've got people who are there sitting that they bring in, and then you've got people who are online. And so they jump around. So they jump from one issue to another issue to another issue, and they pick up online people for one thing, and then they go back to people there for something else, and then they go back. So it's really disjointed, and it was very difficult to kind of understand and to feel any momentum. And so I just thought it was one instance, regardless of what side you are on that topic, it was one instance where the Zoom and the online, the way it's being implemented was not making it easier. It was making it harder. And it's hard enough sometimes to follow some of these issues and the different people speaking and why. But when you add 3 or 4 issues that are all in front of that one group over 4 hours, it was entertaining. That was a polite way to say it, but it was didn't seem like very efficient government to me. But anyway, that's all I've got.
Tom?
Madam Chair, feel free to move this as sort of a brief aside to ask my colleagues while we're here what everyone thought of our licensing meeting, just having it on a separate day, and thought that was successful in the timing of that. And are we going to continue the pilot? I can just say, for if I may, for my own, it's another kind of part of the workday for me to carve out, and I can kind of shuffle stuff around, but I wouldn't be able to do too many more of those. But I'd just be curious what everyone thought.
I liked the focus of it, that we were just dealing with those topics all as one, particularly because we had a disciplinary hearing, which we don't, is not the norm. That would have been over a lot faster. But obviously looking for feedback from the board members. I mean, we wouldn't be doing it more than once a month. But if the timing's not good, and I would imagine most of the meetings will be a lot shorter. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I had a conflict and had to leave right at noon, but now that it's on my calendar and there's a schedule, I can solidly carve it out. And this was something that was on the calendar before this meeting got scheduled. But I also liked the focus of it for that specific purpose. We did it to create more time on Wednesday nights, and we've had a series of relatively short select board meetings, but I think that you and I as chair and vice chair can really start to weave in some more topics into the agenda so that we're not leaving it, as quickly, and the community seeing us accomplish something, and that it's worth having moved these items off the Wednesday night agenda.
Right. And we do want to weave in some more joint meetings with other boards as a big part of it.
Yeah, I liked it. I had a broken oven, so I was a little distracted, but it might be hard in the summer, that time of day, but I don't have any good time of day in the summer really. So it's sort of, I think that's as good as any, 10 or 11 o'clock on a, maybe, Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, somewhere in there. Some of those are better than others, but yeah, I thought the focus was good. And I think if it can shorten this a little bit and give more time for sort of, more robust conversations, hopefully, fully informed with the right information, then I think it'd be great. If we're going to sit up here and just sort of make stuff up like we are forced to do sometimes, then no, but if if we've got the right stuff in front of us, I think it could be really helpful.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I had a personal commitment, could not attend, but I look forward to working on the concept. I still believe we can do a lot more in these evening meetings. We talked about a lot of things tonight that we kind of slid back, and we should talk about them more frequently, so I don't forget about them. And our fellow citizens keep asking me about these things, and I said, "Oh well, we'll get to it next June or something." Now, so I think we should keep going.
Okay, that's good direction. Brooke?
I just, and really communicating well with the other boards that we want to have joint meetings with, so we can get things scheduled on the calendar, because Chase, getting people. And that my other thought was, I'm kind of hoping that doing the licensing and petitions during the day will be helpful to the business community, and to not have to sit through long evening meetings on stuff that doesn't necessarily take that long, but they don't know when it's going to rise, so they're here for an extended period of time. So I know it's a burden it's one more meeting, and from that perspective, it's a little more of a burden on town administration, but hopefully it will iron out over time.
Well, I think it's less of a burden if it allows us to maybe not create a whole nother licensing board, because that's going to be a major undertaking. And I would rather have the joint meeting here on a Wednesday when people are used to tuning in than have the joint meeting with other boards, which we more want people to see than these more boilerplate issues. Spending the time on Wednesdays.
Madam Chair, I'd also just say quickly that I went to the Land Bank Commission meeting yesterday for a completely separate set of duties that I have for a board that I serve on, a nonprofit board I serve on. And they talked about Chapter 191 licenses for quite a while and had a briefing on the Harbors Plan from the Harbors Institute at UMass. And they also talked about their fire plan with their excellent foreman, Jeff Pollock, on some maintenance they're going to be doing in Gardner Farm. And it very much echoed what the chief and the DCR rep had tonight. So yeah, quite a bit of overlap, of course, with the other boards and commissions, of course.
Great. If there's nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
It's interesting.